Analysis Day 3. You should have received in your email yesterday the handouts that I sent to help you look over and follow, as well as a Mask of the Red Death paragraph. I have 1 and 2 of them. And I also included today a worksheet for you to follow. We'll be going over it in the video, but if you'd like to actually either do it before the video, before watching it, stop it now, or if you'd like to pause the video while you're doing it and go through it yourself, that would be splendid. So let's get going. So go ahead and look at your handouts and read the 2 paragraphs that I have. That's the first 2 paragraphs from the Mask of the Red Death. Today we're going to be looking only at the first paragraph, but having the second one helps to at least see where it's going, and you can start looking at characterization and symbolism in that paragraph. Again, today we're only dealing with the first one. And my purpose is to show you, one, a lot of times in short stories, the first few paragraphs give you the meat of what's going to happen, give you a lot of the symbols or characters if they're there, because you have to compact a lot into a short space, especially with some of the older stories. So you can go ahead and see how necessary it is to pay attention to details within short paragraphs instead of waiting till the end. You've got to start paying attention as you read. Now, I want you, once you've read this, to look at what really stands out to you about paragraph 1. The nice thing about Poe is that you, 1, know where his reputation precedes him, so you know where he's coming from, and 2, he's very obvious about what he's saying. You're not guessing if this is about living or dying. It's Mask of the Red Death, and it opens up with lots and lots of death. I use this story, 1, because the kids like Poe, and 2, because there's so much obviousness about it that it makes it easy to demonstrate the analysis part of it instead of trying to grasp at maybe headier meanings in something else. All right, so what stands out would probably be horror. This is a horror story. The fact of the use of blood and red consistently, that it's a very dark atmosphere. And you're going to use what you notice about this to guide the discussion. And this is for you as a parent. 1 tip, use stories you're familiar with already, or use things that you like, or maybe even if you don't like, you know how to teach it. That's what I do when I'm choosing, partly what I do, and I'm choosing what I'm going to teach. And you're going with what you notice. There are probably many, many more things in the story that I don't actually teach, but I have a specific end in mind when I teach this story. It is for analysis. It is for primarily symbols and the structure of a short story. So that's what you're going to be using. So let's follow the process together. First of all, let's look at the details. Ask yourself these questions. And again, when you're teaching this, because you're the teacher, you're the homeschool mom, you need to be reading not just with the guide to analysis, but the kind of questions you need to ask to help your student analyze it. Even if they know the process, if they come and they say, I just don't get this, you need to know, you need to be able to ask these sorts of things to them to help them get it. So what color is mostly associated with the pestilence? Where on the body did the disease most manifest itself? How long did the death process last from the beginning to the end? And this probably should have been first. How long had the disease been affecting the country? Now, go back through with a red marker. And again, this is where taking small chunks, you're going to start to see, if you were to do this paragraph by paragraph, how long you could make this take. But you're going to go back through and you circle any word associated with red, blood, death, madness, horror, something along the lines in this paragraph. if you read the entire story, you would keep going with this. Again, this is where I have my students do this because I know the story. And I can go ahead and get them to get started. But if they were to read this first paragraph and I were to say, all right, what do you think is going to continue throughout the story? And they were to say the red and the blood, because there's so much, I'd say, all right, probably then you should be looking for this. Again, this is you knowing the story and helping them out. All right, so now we've looked at details. Look at the understanding part. Define any words you don't know. Make sure they know what avatar is in relation to this story. Pestilence, sometimes they don't know what pestilence is. Sometimes they think they look at seizure as seizure and not disease taking hold necessarily. Sometimes termination they're not quite sure about. So make sure that you go through, and even if it's something you know, like ask them, what does this mean? Write a one-sentence summary of the first paragraph. Either you have it in your worksheet, you can either write it there, or you can write it. I'm again a big fan of marginalia, and there's a place on that where you can actually write it. So, go ahead and do it there. And then explain out loud what's happening. Because writing and speaking are two different, they're two different skills. So being able to explain it. Let's say that you have a student, again, who doesn't write well, but can explain well, or vice versa. Your student can encapsulate things really well in a sentence, but when it comes to talking, blah. So if that's the case, have them read that sentence to you. So they're developing both of these skills. Also, if they are going to college or they end up going to like a public or a private school later on, they're going to need to be able to verbalize in class what's going on. And this is good practice. And then doodle what's going on. You might not want to have them doodle what's going on in this one necessarily, but if you have doodlers, I'm a huge fan of this, especially in something that's very visual, or there's like this really, especially the second paragraph, where you're getting a castle and you're getting all these people and they're having these masquerades and parties and ballet dancers. Doodling is a good way to help them follow the flow as well. So you could do a sentence summary and then a doodle of whatever you think the main central image is, and let them follow it both visually and with words. And you should do this too. All right, application. The second paragraph, this is, again, application is you guiding the discussion and helping them to start discovering the kind of questions they need to ask. Because they don't know the right questions, they're not going to get any answer, even if the answers are in front of them. They're not going to realize it's an answer. So in this, where do you see death happening on a major scale? You can look at life itself, because everyone is dying, which is kind of the point. Or you could look at certain places where a disease will manifest itself and there's a sudden death. And you could do a research paper on this. And this is a good, let's veer off into history, let's veer off into modern epidemics, let's veer off into science. This is a place where you could connect it across the curriculum. And then for the second paragraph, you can start to really get into how various ways that people try to either avoid death completely, or they try not to think about it by using distractions and pleasure. And the second paragraph, I actually included it partly so that you can start to see how you can apply it, not just to the fact that everyone is going to die, but how people distract themselves from that knowledge or try to completely overcome death. Now, so take a look at it. I went through and I highlighted, as I suggested that you do. I could have done victim, but I highlighted in red the first part. And this is where, when you're looking at what an author is doing, but let's say you haven't done characters yet, or you haven't done, he's not really introduced, well, this is a metaphor, but he hasn't really introduced other metaphors into his story, and you're wondering, well, what is he doing? I know that there's this feeling that's being created. I know he's using all these words, but how would I analyze it? So this is a start. I start to see he's using this kind of imagery, this kind of motif, a recurring element in literature. He's using this, and it is creating this atmosphere. And again, this is atmosphere and mood are major parts of a text that you would often look at and talk about. So that's just one of those where you need to have that list of 10 or 20, maybe I should put that together, but your list of 10 or 20 literary devices that you really should be looking at anytime you're looking at a text, and especially if you're looking at possible paper topics. So let's do the analysis. We're going to look at mood or atmosphere. So again, this will help you guiding your student, one, first of all, just looking at it, and two, having a list and say, you choose what you're going to focus on when you write a paper, but having it so that they have these basic concepts. All right, so the question is, what is the mood and how does the author create the mood? That's the question. If you are writing a thesis, it has to be a statement, not a question. And how you do this, I love this. I taught AP language and literature. I think it was a literature teacher who did this, AP Lit, but the AP Lang people, we did it as well. If you're looking at mood or atmosphere, you're wondering, how do I even do this? Have a list, one side positive, one side negative, connotation. Sometimes it could be supposedly a positive sound, but then it's really negative and connotate, like contextually. Of negative words and images. Make a list and see what the balance is. All right, positive, I was looking through the list again after I'd done this PowerPoint, and you could say sympathy. That's a positive word. But because of the Red Death and the devastation and the horror and the madness and all these other things, they actually were outside of the realm of sympathy. Like, people were avoiding them because they were so afraid that sympathy no longer had any real meaning. So the list is highly on the realm of the negative. So they're overwhelmingly negative, and so they're creating an atmosphere of horror or creepiness or fear. And you can actually Google atmosphere words or mood words and get a list. Like, if you're not sure, is this an actual mood word or what, you can get those lists to keep so that students can actually say, all right, this is what I believe, this is the best word for this specific passage. Because there's a difference between horror and creepy. Creepy is, my skin's crawling, it's weird, but horror is downright madness and death and all sorts of badness. So to make sure that that's what you have that. All right. Now, the one way to approach the analysis with this one is to look at the atmosphere and mood throughout the story. And you're going to discuss how maybe the author creates it using imagery, repetition, and color motifs. You already have seen that in the very first paragraph. There's the imagery of the Red Death personified and how it treats a person and what happens to their face and what happens to their skin and to their body and how people react. Repetition, the repetition of all of these kind of disgusting things. And you'll see more of the repetition as you read the story, but there is repetition in here. And then the color motifs. So there's this recurring element in this story using color. It can be red, but he also goes into black and he goes into a lot of other colors. They're not as overwhelmingly used, but that motif exists, and it starts in the very first paragraph. So because he clearly establishes a mood of horror and he clearly uses at least repetition and color, you already have relationships being established. And that's what you're looking for in your analysis. You could focus only on color motifs and how that it changes the atmosphere. You could focus only on imagery and have 3 separate images as you read through it. You could focus on which things he repeats, because he's repeating the images and the colors. But you could do repetition and how that does a certain atmosphere. Or you could do a paragraph or 5 on each of these. And that's what I want you to see, is that when you're looking at analysis, there are multiple ways of approaching it. If you have the right questions, once you get the answers, you have to start to edit yourself down. Students usually say there's nothing here to write about, but you can guide them into seeing if it's repeated and it's color, and there's more than one color, that's more than one paragraph. And if there are multiple uses of one color for different things, you have more to write about. And it's kind of sparking their imagination. It's there. It's just they're used to thinking in terms of, and it's, I do 3 paragraph essays, but this is what I have. You're like, no, there's so much more that you can say, but this is the beginning to that. So again, you see all of this in the first paragraph, and you could expand all those ideas, or you could even look at atmosphere as one of multiple ways that the author is creating a theme. So no one can escape death, not even the rich and powerful, is a major theme of this story. And you could just have atmosphere as one point, and that he creates this dark atmosphere using these different means, but all of it shows that the overall feeling is that of death, horror, and that despite their best efforts, these people cannot escape it. It pervades the story and it pervades life. And this, I have to be careful when I teach this, because I'm dealing with teenagers and I'm not dealing with people who've done a lot of analysis. So I try to make sure, this isn't making light of death. This is just showing how Poe is doing this. All right, but how do you get to this point? Again, it just seems like you're like, oh, I see, but how do I do it myself? Again, knowing your terms and definitions as action terms, like things you can use and not just a flashcard, but things that you put into practice is a huge part of this. But you need to know to ask the question. So you can ask what, how questions, like I did. What is the author doing? And how is he, in this instance, or she doing it? So what is the atmosphere? And how does the author create it? Most books have an atmosphere, there's a mood, an overall mood. Some are funny, some are not, some are bland. And sometimes the atmosphere is not as important in one book as another. So you probably wouldn't focus on it if you don't really see it as coming out a lot. What is the theme? And how does the author develop it? One of my favorites. What are the major characters or a major character? And how does the author develop it? Etc. So if you have, what are the symbols and how does the author use them? That sort of thing. You can also just ask your why questions. I would almost ask the why questions as a way of leading to the what, how questions. But again, just be asking these. Why does the author repeat certain words? Why does a certain character make choices? Why are these characters in conflict? A lot of times you'll see people and they'll say, oh, the conflict is this, and that is awesome. You should know your conflicts. But you also need to know how they got there. Why has this happened? What are their motives? Why, what's the conflict and why, etc. So we are finished with this portion. I hope it makes clear sense that you can see how you get from breaking down a story to asking certain questions using all of those, the details, the remembering, et cetera, to build up to an analysis, and then using questions and that sort of thing to lead you to an analysis. We do have a bonus day coming. I'm going to go deeper. I'm going to recap this, give you a couple of samples, and work on writing a thesis paper or thesis statement. And then we will look at creation and evaluation. I'm a big fan of party planning based around a thing. I think I'm about to be interrupted by my child, so if you hear some noises, that's it. But we're almost done. And I'm also going to be offering a chance for you to work with me free in one of two ways. I am a tutor, but I don't take a lot of one-on-one students just because I have a 4-year-old and some cousins. So I do tutoring, but I would work with a teen in a writing workshop that would help you, maybe not necessarily with writing style, but how to, how to work with it so that you can structure your papers. The other thing is a possibility is going over your 4-year literature plan and helping you plan out what books to read and what sequence to read them. I've done some of this like online, and it honestly doesn't work well, at least the way I've tried to do it, because it needs to be personalized. It needs to be personalized for your students, where they are in their ability to read and also in their interests. So getting together and being a consultant and writing a 4-year literature plan is something that I offer. But on Monday, I'm going to be telling you a way that you can have it as a freebie. So if you have any questions over any of this, please email me. I'm going to be working over the weekend to create some new things for you and send those out on Monday as well. So thank you and have a wonderful day.
I want to tell you something.